Hey Kotaku, it's Evan Narcisse here with Steven Totilo. We're back
Hello.
after a little bit of a hiatus to talk about comics. This week we're not going to talk about maybe some specific books, but mostly crossovers.
Ugh.
And they are the
This kind of thing here.
Yeah.
Forever evil.
forever evil, forever ever living, forever not happening. And we live in a day and age, I think, where the reality is comic book crossovers are a staple of the publishing plans of the big companies that put out comics.
You're talking about like a day and age that's been lasting 25 years, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they've been doing this forever.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue whether
Like one big crossover a year, right? That's what
Yeah,
it is, right?
yeah,
It's
at least one.
It's just one crossover a year, right?
No, it's not. It's more like it feels like two crossovers a month from DC
Yeah.
and almost the same for Marvel, to be fair. We're talking about Forever Evil, which is a crossover that just started in DC Comics universe.
Yep.
Hot on the heels of Trinity War, another crossover that just ended in that same universe. Trinity War was all the big three Justice League groups: Justice League Dark, Justice League of America, and the main big boy Justice League, were all tussling over a magical artifact. That leads into
Tussling over a terrible story. Go on.
Sure.
Terrible.
That leads into Forever Evil, which is in the aftermath of the Trinity War. All the bad guys have basically taken over, and that there's a whole month of bad guys taking over.
We got that.
Yeah, there's tons of those. There's a lot of
these
them.
here.
Bad guys taking over the DC universe because the heroes, the big heroes, are nowhere to be found. And it had me. This kind of stuff gets me thinking.
You love it, right? It's the best book you've ever read. It's the new Watchmen.
This kind of stuff gets me thinking about crossovers and what. Look, we have to acknowledge they're not going away.
No.
And it makes me think about, what do I want from a crossover? What do I want from a big event crossover in Marvel or DC? Other companies are doing them. Like Valiant currently has their big Unity crossover happening now. I'm not reading those books as closely, so I can't speak to it and how it's going well or not. But when I think back to the crossover events that I liked in the past, I think about like Crisis on Infinite Earths, which, arguably started the whole template of resetting the table of the entire universe. I think about stuff like Secret Wars for Marvel, the first Secret Wars.
Right.
And I like that because it brought these personalities in conflict in a way that you hadn't really seen before. And, I think about, what do I want? And the main thing for me, we can start here, is that I want moments that you're not necessarily going to see in singular books, right? Characters who don't interact that much, finally, getting to know each other or not, deciding to hate each other. I want, a sense of consequence, right? Like, if things are going to change, and they always say nothing will be the same, right? If things are going to change, I want you to show me, like, why I should care about the change that follows. And right now, from the Forever Evil, so far there's only been one issue and a bunch of tie-ins. I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that I should care that something's gonna, be demonstrably different by the time this is all over.
It's going to be forever. The evil is going to be forever.
What do you want?
Nothing is ever going to be the same again.
Thank you.
They're going to
Give me some more
they're
cliches.
gonna kill Supergirl and the Flash. That was Crisis on, and they came back from Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Right.
The crossovers used to only happen like once a year. They came out of. There had been crossovers beforehand. Like you go back to like Showcase number 4 or whatever with the Flash and all that.
Flash of Two Worlds.
Well, Flash Two Worlds, which I don't think was Showcase 4, but I'm getting my Green Lantern reintroduction from Barry Allen all mixed up. Sorry. But the Justice League, Justice Society used to meet up, but then Crisis on Infinite Earths was, I think, unprecedented for like how many books were interweaving, kind of blowing everything up, major character deaths. And I hear that it's kind of unreadable now, although I have the Absolute Edition, and I'm looking forward to going back to it just to stare at all the George Perez detailed artwork. But you had stuff like that in Secret Wars, and they happened like once a year, and they felt like an event, and they call them event comics. And I remember for a while DC would do, I read more DC than Marvel as a kid, and I didn't mind the pace of it. Like one year we'd get Legends, the next year we'd get Millennium, the next year we'd get Invasion. Then they started to get on top of each other. War of the Gods and Armageddon 2001, and all these things began to overlap on top of each other, and it just became a mess. And so some of it is a symptom of we become old men and we read these crossovers all the time, and so it's not shocking for us anymore because we've seen what happens when Titans gather to defend the universe.
Right.
So something like Forever Evil is not that interesting to me because I've read Villains United. Is that the one it was called, or something that were was it Neron? Neron was the big villain. But of course, I mix up now with Necron, who was the big villain in the Blackest Night crossover.
Right.
But this sort of just standard, okay, all the villains have come back trope, I've seen that one before. And so I'm looking for something that feels different. And the two that you haven't mentioned yet, but I think we're also both reading, are the Marvel ones, Battle of the Atom or For the Atom?
I think it's Of the Atom.
Battle of the Atom, which for me is fresh because I didn't read X-Men Days of Future Past.
Right.
I don't know how to pronounce
Days
it.
of Future Past,
okay.
that's right.
Which was X-Men going to the future to meet other X-Men or something like that. And so for me, it's fresh that they've taken that idea and amped it up by having the current X-Men, the X-Men of the past, and the X-Men of the future all meet up.
Right.
Oh, so we're going to have like 3 Wolverines meet or something like that. And that's a little bit different for me and novel. So I think the novelty to some extent, I agree with you, is desirable, but can sometimes be dependent on how long you've been reading.
Sure.
But the one that intrigues me the most is Infinity, the Jonathan Hickman one, which is this Avengers crossover. Because, I mean, you tell me what you think it's about, and this may be a problem that we're not sure what it's about, but I think what he's doing is saying, I'm creating a crossover that includes all the other crossovers.
Right.
So it feels like he's got a little bit of some Thanos master plan to destroy the Earth.
Right.
But he's got some Crisis on Infinite Earth energy wave coming in, but then he's got these people who are terraforming Earths and doing something, or terraforming planets, and they're coming after. So I feel like we're getting this idea of what if there was a crossover of the crossovers. Yeah. I kind of like that. So
you know, it's funny. Like Hickman, I like as a writer because you can always feel like there's a sense of a larger machinery in his books. That his Fantastic Four run felt like that, and his Avengers run has felt like that too. What I like about this mostly is that the way that you're seeing the characters kind of come to grips with all this stuff that's going on has felt really like kind of naturalistic, right? There's been a slow build-up in the Avengers books of them realizing, okay, this team needs to be bigger because we're facing threats that are growing. Like the scale of it is increasing, right? And it happened kind of slowly. I like that. It's exactly what I haven't gotten in Forever Evil in the build-ups in the DC universe, right? This stuff feels like it came out of a 3-book crossover, and now it's affecting the whole universe. And the seeds have been there. There have been breadcrumbs in some of the books, but it's been very, very weak threads throughout.
Yeah, they're just sloppier at DC. Sorry, but well, not sorry. It's the truth. They're just sloppier. And I mean, some people complain the Hickman Avenger stuff was overextended.
Right.
It's expensive. They double ship the books a lot, so you're paying $4 every other week for another chapter of this. But for people who either get their comics for free, which I don't know if it's either of us, I buy the Marvel comics.
Some of them I do. Some of them I get comics.
I'm paying for it in full, but I'm enjoying it because I found that with the Fantastic Four run that Hickman did, that it comes together well. But the pacing is important. The DC approach currently seems to be more of, and it's the Jeff Johns approach, right? Because he writes most of the crossovers, and he has for many of the years. Is that I have this really shocking image or this crazy thing that's going to happen. It's usually super violent or creepy or something like that, and it's a thing.
It's like a bookend. You get some filler or like a slower slope. The peaks and valleys are like less pronounced. It's just less exciting to me so far.
But don't you feel like it's a bit like they've come up with, okay, what's the thing we're going to do to shock people? So in Forever Evil, it's Superman's going to heat vision Dr. Light to death.
Right.
And then it'll be a question of whether he does it, but even inspired an article by you on our site about like this idea of Superman killing and when they've kind of done that in the past in the books and in the movies and whatever else. And then in the new one, you did an article on this one as well, Superman snorting kryptonite. So maybe it works because it gets you to write articles about them. But it almost feels like we're watching, I don't know, something that's like, I don't know if it's car crash is the metaphor or pornography is the metaphor or Hollywood blockbuster is the metaphor, but it doesn't feel like natural storytelling. And that's been the big problem with crossovers is that we all read them because we're told that they're important and we want to know what's happening.
Right.
But do they ever feel natural?
Right, yeah. It's felt like, especially in terms of Forever Evil, like this is top-down storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. Like the editorial triumvirate decides that this is going to be a thing, their programming block for the next however months, and it unfolds the way they want it, and then you take this abrupt left turn into whatever new direction the universe or certain individual books are going to take, and this doesn't feel like the writers, the people who are month in month out supposed to be charting the course for these books have that much input. And again, maybe it's part of the transparency of modern day fandom that feels less exciting to me, less surprising to me. Than, again, like Hickman and the other people at Marvel who feel like they have more of a hand in what's going to happen.
Right. I would say that we're beating up on DC for doing these lurching things that feel top down, but Marvel did one that was very much like that a couple of years ago. Fear Itself.
Yeah,
Matt
Fear Itself did not read well. And Matt Fraction's a great writer, one of my favorites.
And that felt like they were like, well, we have an Iron Man and a Captain America movie, so we have to put both of them as the central figures in here, and we're going to kill off all these characters.
Yeah.
And then they did like some weird epilogue series where they kind of undid everything that they did in Fear Itself.
Yeah, and it didn't feel like it was something that was playing to Fraction's strengths.
Yeah.
And it felt like something that was a little bit just too unwieldy. But the X-Men crossover is the one that's really grabbed my attention right now, because what feels the organic stuff, which we both mentioned, is totally there, right?
Yes.
Bendis has been writing all these books, and
Aaron,
right, and everything feels like it's coming together in a philosophical way that's really interesting. Like, and also there's this other part of the X-Men books and the Avenger crossover, which is that it feels like slowly, subtly, like watching a glacier kind of either melt or change direction, like something big and portentous for the Marvel Universe has been coming, right? There's been a lot of time travel in various Marvel books. There's been a lot of, cosmic machinations in a lot of these books. And it feels like, okay, something big is going to happen. There's a little bit of unsteadiness that drives this curiosity to see what's going to happen. Is that wave going to break in Infinity? Is it going to happen afterwards? And with the New 52 and DC's books, I haven't felt that way. I felt like I'm still waiting for like the mold of the universe to set, and there could be interesting things there in that limbo space, but it hasn't felt that way for me.
Right. Well, one thing is Brian Michael Bendis has had his thumbprint on so much of Marvel for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Age of Ultron, which was the crossover they just did. So they're actually doing as many or more crossovers than DC.
Right.
Age of Ultron, which just finished publication a couple months ago, was Bendis's design. That's something that came out of his Avengers run, which lasted about 8 years.
Yeah.
It ended with this whole kind of breaking of the time stream, which then other writers have said, okay, we will use that
And an ending
element.
I didn't love, mind you. Like, I thought it started well, but didn't end well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But that concept of the broken time stream, we've seen other talented writers like Mark Waid go in very different directions with the Hulk book.
Right.
And that's, I think, one of the marks of a good crossover is that they introduce some sort of, even if it's temporary, change to the world status quo, and then the writers can do other things. People used to mock DC for the so-called Red Skies crossovers of Crisis on Infinite Earths. Crisis on Infinite Earths was, cataclysmic stuff happening on all these infinite Earths, and one of the telltale signs that your Earth was about to be done or something was that the sky turned red, and so there were all these crossovers where the only thing that was connected to Crisis was the red sky. A better version of that, I love the Invasion crossover that Keith Giffen did. It was late 80s. Todd McFarlane and Bart Sears and Giffen were the artists on it. 3 80-page giants. It was over very quickly, mostly sci-fi, cosmic stuff. And if I remember correctly, at the end of the second issue, they detonate like the metagene bomb, which was going to activate new superheroes. So in all the crossovers for the third month, it was just every book was exploring like which superheroes may have emerged from this explosion of the bomb or whose powers got messed up. So a very loose idea kind of promulgated through all the books for the writers to interpret as they wished.
Right.
And I think that can work, as Blackest Night did it well too. There's going to be dead characters from every character's backstory or lore that are going to come back with the Black Lantern power. And I felt like writers could choose who they wanted to do. And that was John's, I think, with a stronger concept at DC. In the case of the X-Men books and even Infinity, the fact is Marvel's doing more crossovers, but we don't feel like as averse to them, I think, is because they feel more natural. Those writers have been building this stuff longer. They haven't been derailed by each other all that much.
Yeah.
And DC, to their credit, has allowed certain writers like Azzarello with Wonder Woman until recently, Blackman and Williams with Batwoman and others, to go in their own directions and not even be messed with the crossovers. But they really haven't figured out how to make that universe feel coherent. To your point, I don't really know what the New 52 universe is supposed to feel like.
Right. Like, Superman with Morrison felt one way, but it's not a feeling that's translated into the other books. as far as I'm concerned. Batman's pretty much been the same. There's change in the Green Lantern universe now, and I'm actually liking some of the stuff that's happening there. But there's another crossover about to happen in those books.
You made the point in your piece about Forever Evil on the site, which was about Nightwing, and there's one of the big status quo changes of Forever Evil involves Nightwing. I won't spoil it if you haven't read it yet. I think your article may spoil it. Well, don't read that part of the article.
There's a warning.
There's a warning. And the question, though, is does it matter if there's a change to the status quo of Nightwing when Nightwing's only been around the New 52 for us reading him for 2 years,
right.
and we don't know what the status quo is supposed to be.
To respond to that, and I got a lot of comments on that piece saying that a lot of that prehistory has not changed. That's true, but we haven't seen it. Right. It hasn't been told to us in this new framing of the character's life. And so ultimately it's like, yeah, he's a guy in a mask who used to be a partner to Batman. That's about it. That's all that's been explicitly said. If you jumped on the New 52 2 years ago, you don't feel like any kind of connection to this character. You have to be a longtime reader who's, again, bought into these tropes of constant rebooting, reframing, relaunching, whatever you want to call it, to feel anything. After a while, that just gets to be really diminishing returns.
So my last word on this is, since you would ask me, what do I want out of a crossover, I'll say I am not somebody who's against superhero crossovers. Superhero comic books are kind of ridiculous in and of themselves, so it's not that much further a leap for there to be a bunch of superheroes hanging out with each other. I think that it can be fun, it could be interesting. I would rather they try a fresh idea. They clearly are running low on those as they return to the same crossover tropes. But the fewer the writers that are involved in the core book, the better, especially if they have a long runway into it. And what I'd like to get a sense of is that when the crossover ends, it ends. Yeah. And it doesn't just bleed into the next, bleed into the next, bleed into the next, which is what it feels like DC has been trying to do. But yeah, bring like cool characters together and bring back the thing that was awesome about Crisis and Secret Wars and some of those, which is create those like weird characters that are just for the crossovers, like Pariah and Harbinger and all that.
Right.
Like I love when there's a crossover, like the 4 new characters that get introduced. That's always like a fun element of it. More of that.
I just want moments that are like, okay, I'm only reading this because this book is happening. I'm only seeing, the Hulk and Iron Man have an argument because they're in Secret Wars and the Hulk is holding a mountain range over his head. I'm only seeing, Superman cry over his cousin's dead body because guess what? She's dead, and that's not something that happens every year. Yeah. So stuff like that is what I want. Memorable moments that feel like they have an organic build-up and a natural resolution, and don't make me feel like I'm being strung along for yet another kind of obligatory event.
We'll be cheerier next time.
Thanks for watching, guys.
No, we're not running that. No, we're not running that. Start again.
Sorry. All right. I don't know how loose I can be here.